And once again, it's Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and welcome to the weekly broadcast from Find Your New Normal. I'm Dave Williams, hopefully a friendly host, although in the green room we've been joking, and I've been saying I feel like I'm in the Matrix. I don't feel that I'm really in reality. But and that may be our topics, because those of you that are following us today know we're going into a guided tour of the afterlife, which for some of you may not see that as real, or and may be just very curious, or some of you, now I should preface that, some of you may actually believe and have visited the afterlife and are here for confirmation and sharing. So welcome to you all. Every week we try to take a look at topics that help get answers to the questions that you may have when you're at the crossroads in a crisis and are trying to find solutions that reduce your anxiety, reduce your stress, and get you into the present moment. Because those of you that have followed us the last few seasons know that is the key message. You can't really do much if you're a time traveler going into the past and into the future. You've got to look at how you're living today in the present moment. And we try to focus in on that, but bring in some very interesting topics. And to share that, I have this wonderful friend, Sheila Schultz, who's with me somewhere on the screen. Right now, she's below me, but on the replay, she could be either left or right. But Sheila, you're the only female, so they can easily identify you in the groups. So welcome.
I'm lucky
for being here today.
Thank you, Dave. As always, I am Sheila Schultz. I have a business called A Quiet Mind, and basically I help people to do just what Dave was talking about, stay in the present moment, to reduce stress, to move through crisis. Just about anything in your life is going to be made better when you can learn to live in the present moment. I'm really excited about today's show. I've done a lot of reading and have talked with many people who have either studied the afterlife or who have experienced it. So really today, I'm going to sit back and listen. I'm curious to see the comparisons and the contrasts and see what is new to learn. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, there's so much to learn, and it's so good to have you here, because I just got a number of fan mail pieces directed to you sharing how lucky I am to have you there to balance my energy out. So, you keep me controlled here, because I do get overly excited.
I'm all about controlling people, Dave.
That's really nice.
Yeah, very good.
And today we are going to explore things that I'm personally energized by. And somewhere on the screen we have Curtis Childs, a wonderful example of someone who has an art of presentation. He has his own weekly television show. Well, it might as well. He's got 500,000 followers every week. He runs and hosts a internet video broadcast dealing with Emanuel Swedenborg. And I'll just pass it over to him in a minute to say a little bit about him. But also on the screen, you'll see David Bennett, who visited with us as Curtis did a few weeks back. And he had a near-death experience and shared what that was all about and his views on spirituality. One of the claims for image sake has been his followers that met him on the Story of God with Morgan Freeman. And that was just an amazing show. And in fact, that's probably where I first met him, and then asked Sheila, who knew David, and I sort of followed it through. That was Morgan introduced this spiritual world in a different way. And David was, I think, not only on the first show, but the first guest first interview of the people that Morgan was talking about, and brought a very interesting perspective. So those of you who haven't seen that National Geographic special should go out there and get that. But welcome, Dave. Welcome, Curtis. We're so glad to have you here. The focus is going to be hard because as I wander around this topic of what is the afterlife? A lot of people that I've met have been giving me a variety of different answers. And I wanted to get both of you back on the show because they're two different perspectives. David, you've really had a true life experience that was, out of the ordinary, took you into the celestial world and it gave you information and belief structure that then affected your life. And Curtis, you're talking to a 17th, well, I guess it's an 18th century philosopher, theologian, who spent decades in the afterlife writing his notes and trying to share in his community in the 1750s what the afterlife was like. So we've got a philosopher, spiritual perspective, theologian perspective with a real life experience today. And maybe, David, you could sort of, because you're the one who has something that just happened. It happened to you a while ago, but not 300 years ago. You might bring the audience up on, what is a near-death experience and why is that something people should pay some kind of attention to?
Yeah. Well, Dave, thanks for all that. I'm sure Morgan Freeman appreciates the publicity there.
We're just getting him all revved up for season 2 that I'm sure is in filming.
Yeah,
now.
It starts in January actually, and the DVD for the first series is available now. I hear. My near-death, like you said, my near-death experience was over 30 years ago, but I've had a number of spiritual experiences in and out of the light since. So, but now what I do is I'm a transformational life coach, and I do a lot of energetic healing, and I also talk. I kind of do quite a bit of speaking about NDEs and the afterlife. But near-death experience is just one of a family of spiritual experiences. One of the terms that's being kicked around these days is spiritually transformative experience. And so that is a whole family, and near-death experience is just one of them. But you have, the Kundalini experiences. You have all these types of spiritually transformative experiences that people go through. That then, it changes the way they live their life because it gives them a new world view. Sometimes it's a 180-degree turnaround for them, but sometimes and sometimes it's in parallel with their belief system before. And there's no rhyme or reason. It's funny. There's been a lot of research for 35 years that show that there's no correlation between a person's belief system before and the type of experience that they're going to have. So that's kind of interesting, I think. But I'll let you introduce Curtis.
Yes, Curtis, share a little bit about what you do with the Swedenborg message.
Right. So, let me say that I saw, David, your bit on there with Morgan Freeman on the show, and I thought it was awesome. I watched it, and so I got to hear you describing your experience, and I was impacted by it, and I was trying to take it and say, okay, what can I learn from this, and how can I apply anything to my life? How does this broaden my view of life? So that's sort of a microcosm of what I do with Swedenborg, because Swedenborg was this guy, prominent scientist in the mid 1700s who had a long-lasting series of these spiritual experiences, and he meticulously recorded them all. So I've taken the time to go in there and observe it and learn as much as I can about it and see how it applies and identify the common themes, trying to get what was he really trying to tell us, because he had all this stuff he learned. What's the message he's bringing back, and can that message do good? And I'm doing that through the Swedenborg Foundation, which is an organization sort of devoted to that. And you might wonder why do you need a whole organization? Because there's a lot of material there, and the material does not read itself to you, meaning it can be pretty dense. It can be pretty academic at times. It's confusing at times. It's beautiful. There's all kinds of different moods in it. But once you get in there, I think you find a lot of stuff that can really add to the conversation. So I'm doing the dirty work of reading the material and being, and I'm excited about it enough that it's not a chore. It's like, yeah, I want to get in. I want to learn that. Oh, that's so cool. And so we take that and grind it up and try to make it into something that is going to help people. And we're very much in harmony with the near-death experience community. We often will reference other people's experiences. We've had various authors, Raymond Moody, Howard Storm, those kind of guys come talk to us about their experiences, because it's what we're looking for is if there's an objective reality out there, people are experiencing it, and it's big enough that they'll have different language around it and that kind of thing. But it's got to be there. And near-death experiences were a part of my journey as well. I mean, there's a time when I got into reading those heavily, and they had a big impact on me. And to hear somebody who just had an experience and describes it in clear, modern language, to hear about that was a big deal for me. So I love near-death experiences, and I love Swedenborg, and happy to be here.
It's such an interesting topic because the people that I get to meet show, well, in fact, the surveys show that about 54% of North Americans totally believe in life continuing after death, and about another third believe it's quite possible, but they're not sure about it. It's a very small percentage of people have totally dismissed it, but even in my own small group of people that I meet that have absolutely no religious focus, no belief in God, really begin their journey saying there's nothing after death. When you start to explain experiences that people have had, their ears pick up and they want more information. And that's what I think today's show might give us all, is a basic understanding. Not so much is it true, but is it something that you should pay attention to? Because it does affect your life if you go in that direction. And then you have to decide what is your personal life philosophy. And if you're in a crisis, if you're facing disease, and that you may be looking at death, as in my case, I was asked, hey, you got to make a life or death decision. And I didn't know what death meant. I had to define it. There are people who have lost a loved one and are grieving and are going to mediums in hopes that they can communicate with someone after who has left them, and there's a sense of loss, and they're trying to keep the communication going. There's so many instances where you look at your normal everyday life that if you begin exploring a spiritual perspective that might be well integrated with your religious background and belief structure, it starts to help you live a better life today. Is that not true, Sheila? Is that not what you've discovered about how this thing can be grounded and not just way out there in woo-woo land?
Oh, sure. And I think the more that you start looking, the more you will find people who have experienced it or who know someone who has. And as Dave mentioned, it's not just about getting to the brink of death. For me, it wasn't that at all. It was, being with my father when he was very ill. So it could be almost anything. And I've even read people who it just comes out of the blue. There's nothing really happening in their lives. It just appears. So I would love to start off the conversation. One of the things I've been doing a lot of writing on right now is the difference between love and fear, and how opposite they are, and opposing forces. Most people think it's love and hate, but I really do believe it's love and fear. And it occurred to me that one of the first times I had heard this is when I read Anita Moorjani's book. I was fortunate enough to be in Australia when she released the book in Sydney, and had a chance to talk with her whole group. And I think she brought that up in her book, that her life was about fear of cancer. She was so afraid of ever getting cancer. She had this tremendous fear. And of course, then she had cancer and died, and then just saw this tremendous love. So I would love to hear from both Curtis and Dave, their experiences or what they know about love in the afterlife and how fear is the opposite. Maybe Curtis.
You want me to start? Okay, fine.
Sure.
I will. So Swedenborg puts love pretty high up there in terms of things of importance. He actually begins one of his books by saying, love is our life. And he goes on to say, what does that mean? That love, what we call love, is actually sort of an emotional experience of this thing that is one of the two primary substances of life. He talks a lot about this sort of grand duality. He talks about love and wisdom, or goodness and truth. And he sort of talks about love as the underlying essence of things, and then wisdom as the form of things. So love is important. He says that what we love and what we pay attention to and pursue, that's like that shapes the spirit. That actually deep down who you are at the deepest levels. What do you care about? And what do you care about? And what do you make choices to pursue and that kind of thing? So for him, love is, you can't talk enough about love. And not to mention, there's all the usual suspects of to love other people and to treat them well is the goal in life and is the thing to which we aspire. And that is the means by which you do everything that you want to do, grow spiritually, connect with God, all of that. The fear end, Swedenborg says all unrest is from evil, what he calls evil and falsity. So he sort of puts the good and the true together, but also the evil and the false, so that the way things really are, the truth about life. And I think I'd love to hear your experience, David, but when I read about near-death experiences, people get shown like a life review or something like that. Like they get shown, here's everything that happened in life, but also here's kind of why it happened. And when they see that, everybody's okay with it. They're like, oh, actually, this is awesome. Never mind. Even though beforehand I had no, I couldn't justify why was life like it. As soon as they see the truth of it, it changes them. And Swedenborg says that the truth about life is so good that the only reason we have fear and those kinds of things is because we don't know the truth. That we have a false impression of what's going on when there's sort of that so falsity versus love, and falsity and evil and love and truth are kind of these two that are like light and darkness. They're these opposites there. So those are a couple of scattered philosophical Swedenborg thoughts.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
No, that's great. David, what do you have to say about it?
Well, like Curtis was saying about Swedenborg, love is essentially connected to everything, and everything is connected to love. And in the afterlife, my experience in the afterlife, love was the primary force. That was the driving force. It's what creation is created from, is from love. And the interesting thing was, in the afterlife, I didn't experience any fear. That's an earthly thing. And so I believe that part of our purpose here in life is to overcome fear in this life, and to experience love, and to bring that core of peace into our heart, and which then allows us to emanate that love that we understand. But it's hard, we have circumstance that just pulls us away from our center all the time. And so I really believe that when we're living within peace and love within ourselves, then we can work through love and peace, in this world, and overcome the fear. So I really think, I do agree with you though, that in life, I think, we always have these, because we live in this linear type of life, we have, the bar, so if we have love on one side of the bar and we have fear on the other side of the bar, I think in life, what we're trying to do is we're trying to move ourselves away from fear. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well put. It's what I've discovered on my own. And when it is introduced to other people who are going through some tough times, it really starts to make sense to them that the thing that they really need to look at is the fear in their life. And for me, I always try to work with people on living in the moment, which to me eliminates fear, because everything is fine right here.
Yeah, if you can recognize the fear in life, I think then you can start to see how you choose what you choose.
Right.
So that you're stepping back from your choices, away from the circumstances, and say, that scared the what out of me, and I need to move away from that, because that's not good for me. That's not healthy for me. And so when we look at how we choose what we choose, that it gives us that more empowering way to move forward in life with a clearer vision.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, Swedenborg talks about nothing negative is allowed except that positive things can come out of it, and that I find that I can kind of use fear if it's coming up. I like what's it indicating to me about love? Meaning, if I was nervous before coming on this show, I could say, what am I nervous about? Well, I'm nervous about, are people going to think I'm cool or not cool, right? Or how am I going to come off? So is that an indicator of like, wait a second, am I approaching this thing as if it's like self-serving? Is it all about me, or am I really thinking about, is our conversation going to touch the people on the other side of it? And the more I think about that, is the conversation going to touch it? And actually, because I have to go on the internet and do shows, and sometimes you're like, I don't want to do this. But you think about the people sitting on the other side of the computer, it's a whole different experience than if you're thinking about yourself. So this, like, because you're saying in the afterlife, there wasn't this fear because you're in this state, some kind of state of wholeness. So if I'm in this fear state, where am I, like, not living into that sort of state of wholeness here?
It's interesting because you brought up the life review too, because not all experiencers go through a life review, but I did. And the only fear that was in the life review is what I brought with me.
Interesting.
Because my soul family, the people that were experiencing the life review with me, didn't, I mean, there was no fear there. They were just loving me, supporting me through it. There was no judgment either. So, they were just supporting me through it and helping me to gain what I needed to gain from that life review, But I brought fear with me because I feared that my family would judge me. I feared that, but it was all my fear, because I think in the near-death experience, part of the issue with the difference between maybe the near-death experience and Swedenborg is that in the near-death experience, the experience itself is a process of letting go of life.
Yeah.
So you're not really, you're there to learn, but it's there to help you to release your hold on life. I really believe that that's what the near-death experience is really all about. And so that's why we have a life review. That's why we have, a lot of the elements that you see in near-death experiences. And not everybody needs to go through all that initially, but I really believe that the more you can let go of life, then the quicker the fear dissipates. You come into the purity of your own being, your own essence. Language is the tough thing, like everybody has to come up with new language when they come back.
Well, and that was a problem Swedenborg had too. He would cop out and say, well, earthly language can't describe this right now. Yeah. It even describes him showing his material to like an angel or a spirit, and they're like, that's pretty good, but I guess you're doing and he's like, yeah, this is the best I can do with words, so.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And do you think, I'll ask both of you this question, what do you think about the fear coming up, certainly in our human form, but even in the afterlife, because of the non-duality, because we still are thinking of ourselves as separate than someone else who's able to judge us. When we let go of that and we see that there is just one, you are whole, then that fear drops away because, there's no one there to judge you. David?
Yeah. Well, the duality, and I listened, Curtis, to your episode on this show. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I wrote down was dual citizenship that you brought up. Right. I mean, that's exactly the way an experiencer feels when they come back, is suddenly, whoa, I didn't have a clue as to the enormity of my spiritual being and my physical being. And so the journey that most experiencers, I won't say all, but most experiencers they're trying to bring that sense of duality into wholeness in this life, which is, I don't know that it's achievable, but it's a great ideal to hold, that this is my goal. This is my ideal that I want to achieve, is to meld my spiritual being with this physical being that I'm living with. But it's incredibly hard to do. And like Sheila, like you were saying, it all comes down to, I believe, our levels of consciousness, as far as where we are. Because when I came back, I mean, I had that strict engineer mind, and suddenly I was exposed to this rainbow of color compared to the black and white life I was living before. Because, an experience still to me feels more real than this life, because this life feels dense, confining. It's not as expansive as the afterlife is. So it feels like I'm here on this journey to trudge through this life, so I don't know that it's achievable to actually to actually meld the two together. But I think the closer we can get to it, I think the better off we are. I'd love to hear Curtis's feel about that.
Sure. Well, I just think it's so interesting you describing this sort of fracture between the two parts of us, and that reading a lot of near-death experiences and sort of the phenomenon of post-experience depression in some people, that the reintegration is so difficult. And that's interesting, because you think, wow, you went somewhere, it was so cool. It's just like, that's going to be like rocket fuel for you. But because you're like plunked back into this life where you get a flat tire and people are honking at you and people say things and you still are you, and you still, so, and I think that, because Swedenborg talks about this grander fracture between the two worlds. And he says that back in the day, Dave Williams, you wouldn't have had to give your introduction about, okay, well, maybe you believe this, maybe you don't, because there was just open communication was the norm. He's saying that there was just, this was something that would happen, whether it was through dreams or visions, but people were, pretty much everybody had some kind of direct experiences. And there's part of you that says that, like, if there really are two worlds, that's how it should be. So I wonder if it's kind of a symptom of this larger, that the two worlds aren't talking like they should be, that it's harder for us to kind of reconcile what sort of seems like, oh yeah, we should just be able to do it, but no, it's not like that. And I think that speaks to the complexity of the whole thing, that if you're an engineer, how getting materials to do what they need to do is not, and my dad's an engineer, so I know a little bit about that. You got to heat them right, and they got to be this thick, they got to pass the stress test and everything. There's so much, and that it's not just like, oh, just because it's a spiritual world, everything just works. It's the same kind of, we got to have things right in order to get it. So I don't know if that's an answer to any questions, but I do like just posing thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I agree with you about in the past that we had a better. I think we've our culture has kind of pulled us away from our natural instincts to be in connection with our spirit. Because if you look at a lot of Native American culture, I was very fortunate as a youth to be kind of fostered by some Native American grandmothers, and they view life, that spirit is a part of everything you do in life, and so it's more of a natural way of living within your environment, and so I think we've kind of moved away from that. Just our cultures have kind of numbed us to our own senses of an awareness to spirit, and sometimes we need to be shaken, by the collar a little bit to wake up to that again.
And that shaking, that effect of being shaken, shakes you in a number of different ways as you explore spiritual concepts. If you take, say, a relatively defined Christian upbringing, and I'll use myself as an example. I mean, I was told you must live a life and make choices between good and evil, because when you die, God will judge you, and depending on the actions that you have made in your life, you're going to heaven or you're going to hell. When I started to look into the afterlife, a couple of things jumped out at me that changed my whole brain space. And the first one was recognizing that there was a life review that included a judgment that I made about my life, not that God would look at me and then make a decision, but rather the life review process gave me an ability to look at the impact of my words and actions throughout life. And that knowledge, once I started to absorb it and understand it, has physically changed everything I do in life, because now I'm conscious of a ripple effect that I create every moment with every person, with every word, with every action. And I'm observing in my own mind, in the reality of today, I'm not going to be punished, but rather I'm going to have an opportunity to look at the truth as I see it to be when I die. And so why not look at the truth today and be mindful today of what I'm saying and what I'm doing, and now the effect on others. And as we said at the beginning, is that a loving action? Is that a truthful action? Is it something that I want to be proud of and replicate? or it's leaning more towards the level of evil, that I don't want to do those kinds of things in my life because I know the effect it's going to have on others. So you suddenly find yourself acting differently if you begin looking at something as simple as, oh, isn't that interesting? Dave had a life review. Let me explore that. And, oh, I think I'll go listen to other experiencers who then say, yeah, they had the same thing, and they were confronted by an overwhelming sense of love and wisdom and truth, and that affects them when they come back. So it's a very strange thing that happens to you, whether you're an experiencer or not. If you start to absorb the principles, your life changes.
Yeah, I just want to add on there, because you brought up that idea of, it's not like I'm being given points and judged, but I'm looking at life and looking at my own life and judging that a bit. So Swedenborg says that part of what he would call the heavenly mindset is to love what's good because it's good. And I think we sort of, like, spiritual growth is moving from loving what's mine because it's mine to loving what's good because it's good. Because I have a natural tendency to, like, I did something, that's why I like it. And this is the belief I have, that's why I want to be right in this conversation. Or I did something mean, but I had a good reason because I'm me. Into the position where you describe yourself there, of looking at your own life, and rather than saying, well, it's all me, so I like it all, to say, like, well, this was good, this was harmful, and I want what's good, so that's what I'm moving towards. So you were kind of, it just struck me, I don't know if I'm articulating it well, but as you're moving towards this, wait, I love what's good because it's good, and so that you would be the one critiquing your own life because of your loyalty to what is really good or altruistic or loving.
And I also wonder what everybody thinks about, and sorry, Dave, I kind of cut you off there. Just sort of the next level up of love. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about, we have this idea of what love is, and people say, I'm a loving person, but I hate that, and I hate that, and I hate that, but I'm a loving person. So what I always ask people is, it's easy to love who you love. Let's see what it's like to love what you don't love, and look at that and spend some time in that space, because that's a different definition of love, or it's a different level. So I'd like to know if that makes any sense and resonates as far as the afterlife or your experience, Dave.
Yeah, it's funny because when you come back, or if anytime you've had when I came back from my near-death experience, and then later when I had other spiritual experiences, the love is so prominent that you want to understand it. You want to, like, I was a voracious reader. Anything that had love in the title, I bought it. It's in my library here. And I was just trying to get a grasp on that love, because it was so much more than the love that we have here. And I think what really helped me, because I really did kind of go off the map, just trying to get a handle on this love a few times. I could tell there's a few stories I could tell just as examples, but I don't want to take up that kind of time. But just the thing that I found was that that a lot of times love is a element that is a part of us, and we don't really allow ourselves to recognize that we are love, and the thing that really shocked me was, and the reason that made me want to find out more about this love was that I didn't realize how loved I was until I was on the other side, and then I found out how loved that we all are. We're all loved so incredibly that we just can't comprehend that here. The thing is circumstance jumps in our way, and it knocks us off. So that's why, we love this and we hate that, when I came back, I mean, I loved everything as much as I love this microphone,
Yeah.
I mean, and that created challenge in my life, because, the relationships, family and everything else, they were used to that more specific type of love that was just unique for them. And so suddenly that creates a challenge in my life, because they're feeling threatened because, I'm loving everyone and everything, or trying to love everyone and everything, but we're human. We can't possibly do that. and so it can create challenges if you try to go that far, because we're not saints, and we weren't meant to be. I don't think that very many of us have been put on that path, thank goodness.
And that path doesn't end when you die, because if I understand Swedenborg correctly, this transition into the afterlife begins at being at a level of, I don't know, the spiritual world, where you come to grips with, am I leaning towards love and good, or am I moving towards evil? How am I defining where I'm at? And then in the Swedenborg model, there's another level that you grow into that is more spiritual, and then more beyond that into more angelic. In other words, you're trying to find a path of love so that you get closer and closer to the ultimate source of love and truth, being God. And is that correct, Curtis, that there is a levels in the afterlife?
Yeah, so Swedenborg talks a lot about progression and being able to continually improve. He says, grow in love, grow in wisdom. And he does mention levels. And he's not just in the afterlife. He says everything everywhere has levels to it. This would be the physical things we're experiencing. And we know this. Like you look at, you see a human body, but then there's the organ system level, but then below that there's the cellular level, then there's the molecular level. There are these levels to everything. He likens those to these levels of the afterlife, but he's not saying that they're just levels that are caused by external forces. These are reflections of the levels in the human mind, that we have these sort of tiers of capacity to be able to open. And as those open, you come into this greater love and wisdom. And as you come into that changes your surroundings in the next life, because the next life is the world of the mind and heart. And so it's sort of like the opposite of this world, where the surroundings dictate what's going on in you. There's a dynamic where what's going on in you dictates things like your location. And he talks about just thinking of someone that you become close to them, and you can see them and address them. So he does talk about these different levels, but it's a reflection of the journey that we progress on, and the journey that we're being pulled toward all the time by this immense loving gravity. We actually have to dig our heels in and say, no, I don't want to go any farther to resist it, but it's there, and it's pulling at everyone, but nobody takes it in exactly the same way. He says that the heaven state of mind is not the same for any two people, and the way that people progress, and that it's really everybody's destiny is to become, to progress in love and wisdom, but in your own unique way, so that you can contribute something. And I may have said this last time on the show, but you can contribute something to the whole that in a way nobody else can, and that gives you this deep satisfaction and fulfillment of life, and sort of pulls everyone together.
And is it really a state of mind, or is it actual reality? Because when I look at the interviews I've done or the videos I've watched of experiencers, some experiencers literally see a celestial world with buildings and people and lakes and trees. And, it's a physical representation of this earth that they're labeling as heaven. And then there's thinking of, well, where's hell? Because I'm thinking conceptually physical locations, much like I did, where as I grew up, you're going to heaven, you're going to hell. It's a physical place. Now, experiencers are saying, wait a minute, there's something that's happening here, because there's a hospital, and there are doctors, and there are schools, and there are teachers. But in the Swedenborg model, I'm getting more of it as a state of mind that you create based on your awareness and your growth and your choices that you made both on Earth and in this new dimension help you create the world that you are actually expecting to see. And it may include a desire to be with negative, evil spirits, or move towards more, godly, loving kinds of people. Where does that fit, Curtis? Physical versus state of mind?
So it's real. and it's objective. I mean, he says the spiritual world is run by laws just like this world is. Why does everything look like it does here? Well, it has to do with gravity and electromagnetics and whatever else makes optics. This is why the world is like it is. And the spiritual world is another dimension or whatever that is also following laws. It's not just like I'm creating, like I'm going to make something and then it becomes real. However, there are mechanisms there that interact with the contents of your heart and your mind, just like there are mechanisms here that interact with the contents of your physical body. You know, if I'm in a cold room, I feel cold. But there he's saying that there actually can be an image of the things inside you, around you. It's not that I'm sitting there saying like, I would like a mountain there. It's more like, you know, in dreams or something where there is symbolism that is almost telling you about yourself through the symbolism. So, and that leads into a very real, objective, communal reality where people can be in the same city together. They can be in the same room together. They can talk to each other. It's not like I'm in my bubble fantasy and you're in yours over there. He describes things like the paneling of the wood there and the way that certain buildings are set up and the flora and the fauna. And he would actually say that this world is a simulation of that world, that we get the root of all the things we see here is there. He talks about the spiritual world is the world of causes, and this is the world of effects. It's almost like you think of water erosion. Like you see the Grand Canyon, that's the effect, but the cause is all this water that's been going through. And if we don't see it there, it's like this world is the canyon and the spiritual world is the water. Like it's causing everything here, even if we don't understand it. So those are a couple of thoughts on that.
I love hearing that, because I'll tell you the first thing that came to my mind when you were describing that, Curtis, is, you know how sometimes when you just see something so beautiful and the hair on your neck stands up, or you get this tremendous feeling. To me, it's a reminder of that. I mean, or a reflection of that. So there's something inside you that recognizes that as a divine circumstance, or, you know, just some kind of a hint or reminder. It's like the remembrance. And that's exactly how I imagine is the explanation for those goosebumps, for that feeling of awe, the tremendous beauty in the center of, you know, a normal circumstance.
But does that mean when you die, in a practical sense, and I'm an engineer, do I go into the celestial world and continue to be an engineer? And do I see a guidance counselor because now I wish to be, you know, a different career? I mean, are we simulating the real world at that level? Or is it, as in Robin Williams' film, What Dreams May Come, it's your state of mind that's creating the world that you want to be in a timeless capacity, much like we do when we're dreaming, and except we have more creative control, so we can actually create our own world that we seem to feel comfortable in, and it's not really as it is here on Earth. And that's confusion I get. Talk to an experiencer who says, hey, yeah, I went there, I visited a hospital, I saw doctors, they were doing research. I'm saying, whoa, where did that come from? Whereas perhaps it is just a simulation and a place that I go to continue my growth, my spiritual development, to learn more of love and truth. And I need these constructs around me to bring me comfort and some sense of direction. What is happening?
David,
were you still an engineer in your experience?
No, I was just me. You know, which is interesting because I have friends. In fact, my mentor, Margaret Keene, when she died, she went to this beautiful meadow, and you know, and the funny thing is she took me there one time. This was a light experience that I had when I was trying to integrate my experience. She taught me that I can return to the light at any time. It's just a matter of understanding, you know, knowing where my doorway is, basically. And we all have a doorway within ourselves that connects us to our essence, to our greater totality, our light. And so I walked into the light with her, and we went to her meadow. I also had another experience where I went to a place that was like a giant canyon. that and there was music flowing through the canyon, and there were these little alcoves all along the walls of this canyon where you could go and you could contribute your resonance, it wasn't really music, it was more than just music, but you would contribute your resonance to this flow of just divine energy. And so, I mean, that's very unengineering like, so, but I loved it. But I'd like to circle back on something that Curtis said about the different levels. The one thing that was very clear to me was because I all of my experiences in the light, I connect with my soul family, and it's like we have lived multiple lives together in this, and we contribute to each other, and they continue to counsel me in this life. But there, we also, our little family also had teachers that would come in and help us, and sometimes we would branch out and help other groups and things like that. So I think there's this, like you said, that there's levels of where you are, and I think it has to do and dimensions and inner dimensions. So it's so much more expansive than what we see here that it's very difficult to explain. But I really do believe that, and I think it has to do with more of our stream of consciousness and where we're kind of plugged into the divine with our consciousness. And because another thing, Curtis, you said, is how we contribute back. I think that that's part of the contributing back is when we're plugged into the divine with our consciousness, we still maintain that sense of being, but also a sense of being the whole. It's like I saw everyone as fragments of light, but within that fragment was a reflection of the whole. So it was beautiful. It was, it still chokes me up when I think about it, but as we are, when we're in the light, I believe we can increase or decrease our frequency according to what we're trying to contribute to the whole, So I think there are multiple levels and multiple dimensions within, the afterlife. And so it allows us, kind of like what Dave was saying about, we can create, we can create a city. We can create a coffee house to sit down and have a cup of coffee with a dear friend and work on something that we're maybe working on together. I think that that's all possible in the light. And I know other experiencers who have, done some amazing things, and experienced some amazing things on the other side. I didn't so much. It was just me and my family, and we were, surrounded by the light, and we were working on, getting me back here.
But there's a lot of work that has to be done when you go into your first level, because not all of us who die are wonderful, kind, generous people. There are a lot of angry, hostile, resentful, racists who die, and now they are in the afterlife with the rest of us. So there has to be, as Swedenborg and as Curtis has been trying to share on his shows, there has to be a place where all that consciousness that of who you are that you bring with you into the afterlife has to be dealt with. And you're going to choose to be around people who are like you, just like we do today. We choose neighborhoods that we want to live here on earth in that bring us comfort. And in the afterlife, you're not going to hang out with a murderer, and that murderer has to figure out, do I want to continue being a murderer in the afterlife? How am I going to do that? If no one dies in the afterlife, how do I kill somebody? Right. And where does evil get transmuted into love? So there has to be a layer, and I think Swedenborg is talking many religious and theological principles of saying there's a way of getting all of us to grow in that first level so that we can move up to the more angelic realm. Is that true, Curtis?
Well, we were talking about in the beginning the importance of love, right? And one of the principles Swedenborg described as being universal is that everybody is allowed to pursue what they love. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to love something good, right? So but even so, your choice, your freedom to be able to pursue what you love is going to remain intact. You're never going to be brainwashed or forced. There's a place that however, if you pursue certain things, the rest of us have to react. And we do that in this world. If you're saying if somebody is pursuing deliberately harming people, we say, okay, well, we can't just have you at large. We create these places that you have to go, and depending on within there, you have more freedom if you have good behavior, that kind of thing. Okay, we'll let you out in the yard with everybody. You can read, you can do the laundry, but if you continue to do things, then it's like the confinement gets greater and greater, right? Because that's the only way that not only are the rest of us safe, but you're safer, because the more you commit those kinds of acts, the more damaging that is to your ability to love good things. So I think that's the basis of the principle Swedenborg talks about with this sort of the heaven and hell dynamic is, you can do whatever you want, but just here are the side effects of various kinds of life choices. And I was thinking also about this sort of division of labor that you were talking about, Dave. And are you still an engineer? Well, what you were describing other Dave with, I'm pointing, but I guess in the real thing that you, I'm used to on my show, like I'm always pointing at graphics and stuff like that. So it's impossible to really figure out the mirror flip thing. But you were talking about, you have your group of people, but then there was somebody else who came and taught you guys. And to me, that's like, there's a division of labor. Like somebody's job is go teach soul families at level whatever it is about thing X. And I think your question about are you still an engineer, Swedenborg says everything changes into what corresponds, meaning the physical world is an echo of the spiritual world, but not a direct echo. He's like, there are spiritual things there that we talk about how our words can't really describe them well. Well, if it was all the same as physical stuff, we could easily describe that stuff, but it's different kind. You were saying resonance, but it's more than it's some spiritual thing that they probably have one word for. It's like, oh yeah, you're blah, 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 but we don't have that because it's something different. So whatever it is that you love and do here, there's a spiritual version of that that's sort of the root of it. And I would think that whatever you truly love, if you have a job you hate, it's not going to transfer. But whatever you truly love, if it's not directly the same thing, there's a spiritual analog. There's a root of it. You're going to find, oh, this was the essence of the thing I loved here. This is what I can do, or something. You know what I mean? Something along those lines.
Yeah. But there is a
that makes
desire
perfect
to have
sense.
balance between good and evil. And that was an interesting Swedenborg concept for me, because that sometimes that balance shifts in the celestial world as it does on Earth. On Earth, we have a war and we have, ISIL going out, killing people and tipping the balance of good and evil. The same thing has happened in the celestial world, where good and evil battle out, and there's a need to balance. And that echo effect is replicated here on Earth. But that was a different way of looking at the realities of this afterlife that we're going to visit. It's not all just sitting on clouds with a harp and having, a good time, or it's not you deciding to develop a coffee shop and have, a coffee with your loved ones. There are people who will enter into your space or can enter your space that create discomfort for you. And it has to be handled in the celestial world differently than it does here.
I think it's handled, though, and like Curtis was saying, in that first level, because I think we come into this life, we make agreements that we're going to, plug ourselves into this world as it is right now, and that we're going to accomplish maybe we're going to set some goals or ideals for that lifetime. And I think in the process of dying, and we're at that first level where we're letting go of the evil, we're letting go of those things that we, because when we go into the afterlife, we recognize, well, that was a part of this life, but it's not a part of the actual evilness is not a part of this essence. If you were to ask someone that you perceive as evil in this world right now, if he perceived himself that way, he wouldn't. He'd perceive himself as wanting love and expressing love. Sure. That's because we all want love and we all want to express love, but sometimes the way that our mind contrives it is a little twisted. And so then, like Curtis was saying, then we have to protect that person from himself and from community in some way, in some form. The problem is when you get group minds together, and that frequency starts to feed on itself. It's like mob mentality, and it gets out of control. And that's where you get these ISIL groups and things like that, is because they're caught up in this mob mentality. And a lot of times it's not even under their control anymore. They've given their power away to someone or some ideology or something like that. And so they're being carried along. Now there's an experience in that. There's an experience in being carried along with this mob mentality, but they will not individually perceive themselves as being evil.
And that carries on into another world. I mean, I was listening to an experiencer panel where they were saying, hey, Hitler exterminated the Jews out of love of mankind. This was, in his mind, a very kind and loving thing that he was doing. Well, if that was in fact reality, he died. He's now in the other level doing what? And what is his impact there with the people that are following him versus all of those who now died here, who saw the impact of his choices now being in heaven or in the celestial world? How is it balancing out? And that's why I was going to Curtis for this balancing effect of good versus evil and its correlation back on Earth as we go through this contortion of trying to find the best fit.
Yeah, go ahead. I think that I wouldn't want to go through Hitler's life review. I think he had a lot to process, and I think a lot of his letting go of this life is gonna. Time doesn't exist there, so I mean it's all instantaneous there, but it's just it's all in the same moment. But I mean that's going to be a big process of his, before he returns to life again, or before he integrates into his whole being, So I mean that's all. I was thinking of that. I was like, wow, I would not want that life review.
It's one of the things that we run into a lot, and I certainly encourage people to have compassion for the people that they have frustrations with, regardless of the level of damage they're doing. As Dave was saying, you can get caught up in a mob mentality of anger towards a person, and then you become that just as unconscious as that person. So, it's like that not having the ability to see that we all have the capacity for fear, and we all have the capacity to get caught up in something that's not true, that our minds have created. So there's sort of for me, it's a way to bring me down. If I feel in a calm place, if I feel agitated toward a person, I can turn it around really quickly by saying, you know what, there's a little bit of me. Let me just sit back and look at that, because as humans, we all have that capacity, and they've proven it scientifically how normal people can go into a room and be encouraged to torture people. So it's absurd, but it's true. Mm-hmm. So that whole thing about fear and getting too caught up in your thoughts is very close to my work.
And I guess the point is it's not wiped away just because you die. I mean, the religious structure that I grew up was that if you got judged appropriately, now you're in this perfect place and you can live forever in a state of happiness. And as I'm exploring the concept, I'm saying maybe there's other things I've got to think about. And that's why I wanted this show to go on, because I just had a conversation with a friend who, like many of us, are saying, I think I might be in the throes of death, and I'm trying to get an idea of what's going to happen to me next. And I think I'm choosing to believe that when I die, I'm going to meet my ex-boyfriend, and we're finally hooking up, and we're going to live in a nice place, and we're going to, they're painting this picture, as What Dreams May Come in the movie, of exactly what would bring them happiness and joy, and saying, well, is that how we take all the information we're sharing today and giving words of advice to our audience? what do we do with these philosophical concepts, these constructs that are difficult for us to even to understand here, let alone understand there? It's obviously something that happens to experiencers. It's something that happened to Swedenborg 300 years ago. There are mediums who profess direct communication with the dead. There are angels that are making themselves visible to people. There are so many unexplained events happening around us that get you to take pause and say, so what do I do with this? And we've only got a few minutes, here at the end of the show. Maybe the three of you can give your perspective of what does this really mean, so I can live my life differently tomorrow based on listening to this replay and getting some very mind-blowing concepts being presented at me. David, maybe you could begin, because I know it had an effect on your life having direct experience with this. What is the message to our audience now that we've blown their mind with some new way of looking at life?
Yeah, I think if we can come to acceptance of who we are, that this is who I am right now, and sure, I've got some issues, but I have all the opportunity I have available to me to work on these issues, to be a better person, and to connect with my spirituality. And then once I can make a connection to my spirituality, then I'm going to embrace the unknown. I'm going to embrace and allow it to unfold in my life and follow the stream of consciousness or the stream of the divine that directs me into a better place, because I really believe that if I'm doing the best I can in this moment, then I'm creating the most powerful future I can possibly create.
That's great words. Curtis, how would you add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with it, is how I would add to it. And yeah, that according to Swedenborg, intent is what matters. It's not even necessarily actions and results, because intent, and as you were saying, if I try my best, that's what matters. We can only do what we can do. And I would say intent matters, and you probably have to do less than you expect. I mean, he seems to describe that we can think there's this huge mountain to climb. I need to sort myself out. I need to become perfect. I need to never be upset at my spouse. I need to never be mad at the dog. But we're trying. And there are limits, just the way the brain is. We are trying. And if you're able to make little actions, those can matter. I once heard this study that, like, in getting fit physically, there's a huge difference between no physical activity and just getting up and going for a walk once a day. There's a huge difference there. The difference between getting up and going for a walk and Olympic athlete training is not as big as that difference of getting up off the couch in terms of longevity and that kind of thing. So as long as we're like just trying a bit and to do what we think we should do based on what we are, it's going to be all right. You work at it and you do well. So don't get discouraged. And a lot of it's intuitive, but a lot of it's not. You think about health and you got to learn. There's things that you think are healthy, but turns out they're not healthy. And there's things that you wouldn't have ever guessed that are healthy. So go forward, continue to learn, but also just know that everyone's working on their own journey, and be compassionate and try to contribute.
And Sheila, our audience just loves the way you always ground us at the end and wrap it all up in a nice little ball.
No, pressure.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the reputation you have now. So
Yeah, we've heard so much about it. So.
Yeah, we're waiting.
Okay. You know what I love about these shows, Dave, is I leave this show and I have this tremendous sense of pause. There's something that makes me stop and really reflect and think about things maybe in a slightly different way than I did before I sat down an hour ago. So I think that's the key for me always, is to, at every opportunity, if you can find different ways to open the door to new experiences, to listen a little bit more, slow down and pause, and realize that, as Dave said, you can start fresh in every moment. Right now, you have an opportunity to make a difference. Thank you guys for coming.
That's terrific. And the world knows my reputation. I look for the structure and the checklist and the action steps. And, all I know is that I had to make a life decision, and I knew nothing about death. and I knew nothing about surviving my disease. And so, being analytical, I went off to get information that would help me make a life decision. And in this journey that I've been on, I've met fascinating people like Sheila, first off, and unbelievably knowledgeable people like Curtis, and experiencers like David, who has gone and experienced something that it's hard to understand. And all of this information has helped me find little baby steps to take that change my life, so that at the end of every day, I'm so grateful for having been in that moment, being the best person that I can, moving in the direction of being a better person tomorrow, and the next day waking up all excited about the wonders that life is going to give me. The relaxation, the lack of stress, the sense of peace are wonderful. My problems and challenges are still there, and some of them even worse than they were before. But the way I handle it is so different because of all the information that people here on the screen have been sharing with you today. So it's take what you can from it, put it together in a way that is comfortable to you, and then reach out to those people that you think can help you take the next step. Because Curtis has an incredible show every week that certainly blows my mind. He's got hundreds of hours, and every day my morning coffee is watching Curtis. I feel like he's my best buddy because he's got so much to share.
Right back at you.
And interviewing people like David, Bennett, and in hearing what experiencers are saying, give me so many new ideas to wrap into what my life journey is. So, as Sheila says, we're trying to give you something that can make a difference in your life, to live in the moment. And this information, if treated in this particular way, should help you deal with those critical issues in your life that you're looking for a solution. But everyone here is there to help you. Curtis is there. David has a coaching program. Sheila does the same. Sheila and I are going to try and create a community that will allow you to come in and talk further about the issues that we raise. So we're all here to help you. We hope that you enjoy the information we present any week, and are thankful for you to be there, because without you, we wouldn't have anyone to talk to. So we're really pleased that you find us interesting enough to show up every week, and we're grateful for you. We do invite you to come back next Thursday, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll carry on the conversation with another guest, and our guests here today are going to stay in their position. We're going to go back into the green room and continue what we were talking about now. But for those of you that leave us, thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.